We have been operating almost for 40 years in Africa, and I think in the last 5 to 10 years we really have seen a significant change in the continent, especially with regard to reforms. We also see that, I think, when you look at the World Bank report on doing business. In general, what we have seen and what we have experienced is that in a lot of countries, I think more 30 or 40 out of almost the 46, 51, what is, have been improving on regulation, and especially I think African governments have been much more open to private sector and to stimulate private sector investment, and have recognized much more that the private sector is really the motor of development. And interesting, if we look at investments from foreign direct investments, 2 weeks ago we organized a meeting with Dutch companies investing in Africa, and we had a huge discussion on what are they doing. Well, first of all, most of these companies are doing very well in Africa. One of the companies, Heineken, told us, but it's also Unilever, told us that relatively the profitability in Africa is better than in other continents. So there are a lot of opportunities. But then if you look at reforms, where still reforms also are needed, is that most of the companies mentioned that the lack of infrastructure still is tremendous and hampers their investments and their investment possibilities. Also the access to finance, what we see that also those big companies want to, let's say, promote local, let's say in the supply chain, local entrepreneurs to supply input to their companies, and that still lacks finance. And of course, if we look at FMO's own experience, we see that, and it has been mentioned already, that power is a huge obstacle for further investments. If we see that the positive trend, I think some examples, of course, Rwanda is an example of the tremendous number of reforms. It was on the top of doing business, the number of reforms they implemented in doing business. And one especially, I think, was very important on creating more access. So it was much easier, it has been made much easier in Rwanda to register property. So that's very important, to get access to finance. If we look at positive examples also in the power sector in Kenya, what we have been seeing in Kenya is that price, so the incentives for investors, of course, very important, stable prices and real prices. You know, a lot of governments still have problems to price the energy price to the real prices and to let people and companies pay the price which is needed. What we have seen in, for example, Kenya, where the government did this, that it helped to boost investment and to create positive expectations to investors. So it is a mix of, let's say, regulatory reforms with incentives. And I think the incentive part, it has to be a very good balance. If we only work on the regulatory reforms, it won't work. So governments have to put incentive in place, as we have been seeing, incentive to lend to SMEs, tax incentives, whatever incentives there are very important. So we see that's improving, but there's still also, I think, a big challenge to go further improving and attract more investors and make the climate more investment friendly even.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.